Hey folks, lately I have been doing work with carbon fiber. You see here, this is the fabric itself, and I'm at a point where I want to start sharing what I've learned and what I know so far. So I'm going to turn this into a little bit of a series, and each episode I'm going to show you different things. We're going to go over laminating or wrapping, I guess you could say, with carbon fiber. In this video we're going to be wrapping this, and I'm also going to be going over things like mold making and resin infusion and different types of bagging methods and stuff like that in future episodes. So for this one, we're going to start out with something simple. We're going to laminate this case in carbon fiber. Now there are easier ways of getting that same effect. You could hydro dip or just grab yourself some vinyl wrap, the sticker stuff in a roll, you stick it over there. You can do all that as well, good and all, but it doesn't give you the same effect that real carbon fiber does, because you can't, like if you look at this, like you can see there are different layers and different heights to this. Each weave is a different height, and then when you fill this up with resin and make it nice and smooth and shiny on the top of it, it gives you more of a depth. You can't, like we're still not at a point where we can print depth. We can kind of fake it, but it's still not the same. So if you have a case that's actually wrapped in carbon fiber, that's cool. It is work, don't get me wrong, it is work to get this to stick onto here and get the effect that you want. But it is worth it in my opinion, so we're going to be doing that with this today. This is the Core V1 from ThermalTake. It's a mini ITX case, fairly small. You can see from my hand here, that's for size comparison. It's a mini ITX motherboard. It looks like you can fit some hard drives and fans and stuff. I mean, it's a case. But I thought that this would be perfect because there are a lot of it's mostly flat surfaces, except for this rounded edge here. This is a perfect case to show off what I wanted to demonstrate. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go over all the supplies and materials that you're going to need for this. Alright, materials list. The first thing you're going to need is obviously the case of your choice. You want to make sure it's something simple, something that doesn't have a lot of complex geometry, because in order to get into all those little places you're going to need to do what's vacuum bagging, and that's going to be in the next video. So that's why this one is perfect, it's all flat edges. Then you're going to need your material itself, the carbon fiber. This is 2-2 twill weave. It's a 3K carbon. What that means is each one of these weaves actually has 3,000 strands in there. So there's 3,000 strands of carbon fiber in here. So it's very, very thin stuff. And you also want to be careful with this stuff because these, see like that? These weaves are not very tight at all. They just come right apart and it moves around. Like this isn't really moving very much because it's small, but when you start getting to bigger pieces and it gets heavier, it can start to stretch and distort, and you got to put it all back together. And also, as an example, like it really does come apart and move very easily, so you can ruin it very easily. So just be careful with it when you're cutting it. Just handle it gently. Don't just throw this around. That's not going to work. You're going to end up with this. Then you're also going to need your resin. You can really use any type of resin that you want to. You can use a laminating resin, an infusion resin. You can even use a casting resin, that art stuff that you get from like a craft store. Because of what we're doing, we're basically soaking the carbon fiber onto it, but what I'm going to be using, this is an infusion resin, just because this is what I had on hand. This is from a company called Composite Envisions. There's no sponsorship here, this is just a company that I like using. And across the pond, you guys have Easy Composites. They've also got a nice YouTube channel for where they demonstrate a lot of all this stuff as well. They've even got full kits ready to do small projects about what we're going to be doing. So I'll leave a link to their websites in the description. You are also going to need mixing cups. These are graduated mixing cups. You can see they have all the measurements on the sides here, because you need to mix this. This is a two-part. You have the resin itself, and you have a hardener or an activator. If you want to go fancy, you can get yourself a scale. This was $20 on Amazon and it works perfectly. If you are going to be doing this on a case other than black, let's say it's a white case, the carbon fiber itself, here's a good spot on there. You can see through it, like the weaves are not tight. So if you just put this on a white case, and that white's going to show through and it's not going to look right. So you could either put a primer coat on there. I would recommend a 2-in-1 primer. in black, of course, and go over that, and then give it a good scuff up with some, say, 400 grit sandpaper. Or you could also go this route. This is a gel coat. It's black. This is the same stuff that they use to make boat hulls out of. This is the same stuff that we're going to be using when we get further along in the series, when we start making molds. This is what we're going to be using for that. You mix this up. That again is a two-part. It's got an activator as well. And you brush that on. That's going to be our step 1. I'm going to add more on that when we get to step 1. And then you're going to need some mixing things. You're going to get these. These are cheap again on Amazon. You're going to need some sandpaper. This is 220 grit. Now when we get towards the end of this, you could either continue sanding and polishing, or you can clear coat. So if you decide to go with the polishing route, get yourself a good set of sandpapers, 6, 8, 1000, 1200 and such, and then some good polish. I'm going to be using a clear coat because I just think it's easier. You're also going to need brushes. Don't get anything fancy and expensive because these are one-time use. Each coat of resin that we put on here, this is going to be trash afterwards. I got these a box of 20. These are chip brushes. It was like $20 for a box of like 20 or 30 or something like that on Amazon. I'll leave a link to these in the description as well. Carbon fiber is fairly easy to cut with some good fabric shears. These are more expensive ones. These ones were $40 and they only have a 3-inch reach. But that's also because I've been working with some Kevlar as well. So I needed something a little bit stronger, and these were easily available to me, so that's why I have these. But a good pair of fabric shears will work just fine on just carbon fiber. You also need a good place to work. I'm going to be laying down some plastic just because this is easy to use. Any drips on the plastic, once the resin hardens, you can actually just get it off really easy. You just do one of these things here. The hardened resin drips, they just fall right off. So this is what we're going to be using as our work surface. You also need time. Make sure to set aside most of your day for at least the first few steps of this, because the first step needs about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Depending on what you want to do after that, it could take even more hours. It's basically hours between each layer. So set aside, if you want to get the whole thing done, I would set aside at least a day or 2. So no plans on putting one piece on and then going out for the rest of the day. Another thing is a well-ventilated area, of course, depending on what type of resin that you're using. This stuff here is low VOC. It's volatile organic compound. It's basically, there's no odor, no really bad smell to it. The gel coat does, so a well-ventilated area for that. If you're going to be clear coating, then that's a well-ventilated area as well. If you're using the casting resin, the art stuff, that stuff is really bad. You want to make sure a well-ventilated area plus a mask if possible. I believe that covers everything as far as supplies and time is concerned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull this case apart, lay out on each component, and then we're going to continue on, and I'll show you each steps required to get this thing laminated and looking like carbon fiber. Okay, so here's our top and our 2 side panels. I've removed them. And on the top piece, there's an acrylic window. I removed that, and on the sides, there's this honeycomb style vent. What I'm going to end up doing is this is going to end up getting cut out, and something else is going to end up being put in place on both of these. So what I did was I just got some tape, I put it back on the back, and then I used a little scraper spatula thingy to scrape it all on there, so that way everything is nice and sealed. Because when we go and we start brushing on our stuff, we don't want it going through and then dripping back here, and it just ends up making a big mess that we don't need. So this tape is what's going to stop that. This is Tyvek tape, but you don't need to go that fancy. Any type of just a regular clear packaging tape will work just fine. It's just I have it, so I used it. Now the front panel, I removed the filter on the front panel, and there's this honeycomb design on the back, and you can even see right here there's molded on here. This is clearance for the ThermalTake logo. You can see on the back it's pressed right there, so that's to fit into here. So I actually kind of like this. So what I want to do is I want to cover this whole thing. I'm going to cut out all these little honeycombs, and then I'm going to remove that badge, and I'm going to put that badge back on there. However, that is going to require vacuum bagging. In order for me to get the carbon into this nice and neatly, I'm going to need to put the carbon on here, put some disposables over top of it, and stick it inside of a bag and pull that into a vacuum. And that's what's going to get everything into all these nice little creaks and crevices without having anything lifting up on us. So I'm going to have to end up saving this for the next video, because the vacuum bagging is going to be the next video. So if you want to see the full completion of this case, then get subscribed so you don't miss that video. This is 220 grit paper. I'm just going to go over this lightly just to give it a good scuff, so that way our resin has something good to bite into. I'm also working on a painting series, so here's a little pro tip. If your case is already painted or powder coated, you do not need primer, because the manufacturer already did that paint. It just needs something to bite and grip onto. So 320 is preferable. I'm using 220 just because it's not paint, we're using resin. So just go over a little good like this. There. Now you see how that looks? It's all nice and scuffed up. This is all we need. This is going to be plenty for the resin to grab onto and not come up from. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for all three of these, and then we'll come back and I'll start showing you the next part. Okay, and we're back. All three panels have been sanded or scuffed, also known as keyed, and I've also gone and mixed up my resin. Now make sure that you mix your resin according to your manufacturer. This is a 3-to-1 mix ratio. So I used my scale, and I used 0.75 ounces of resin, part A, and then 0.25 ounces of part B, and that gave us 1 ounce of our resin. So now I'm going to take my chip brush, and we're going to use this to spread our resin all over the cases. Now a good thing to do beforehand is you want to give it a good pull. Just grab it, give some pulls, maybe do a little bit of fanning. There's always going to be loose bristles, and if you can get them in there, you can get them out really easily, but if you miss it, then it's in there permanently. Not too detrimental for this stage, because our carbon is going to be going over top of it, but just the same, it's a good habit to be into. So I'm just going to take the resin and the brush, and I'm just going to brush on a real thin layer. We don't need a whole lot, just enough to cover it. Alright, here we go. This has all been brushed on. You can see I've got a nice coat all the way across everything. Right here it's a little dry, but that's because, like I said, remember I was going to cut this part out anyway, so I didn't brush anything onto this area, and that's part of the area that's going to get cut off. But all the rest of it is nice, clean, brushed on. This will ultimately self-level eventually. Shouldn't take that long anyway, but this is going to be here for a while, which is why, remember I told you that part about needing time? This needs to sit for roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours. Now when that happens, it's going to reach what's called the B stage. What that means is it will be started to cure. It'll be cured enough so that it's still sticky, but with a gloved hand you can touch it and nothing will stick to the glove. It's just a time frame in its curing process. This stuff cures, it does not dry. There is a difference. Like, say if you're using, depending on what type of paint you use, paint dries, this cures. That part B that you mix in, or the, like back there, the hardener that you mix in with the gel coat, that activates the stuff that's in there, and it creates what's called an exothermic reaction. Pretty much heat is what cures it. So those two things mixed together, it's going to generate heat and cure itself. So if you have a good amount, like say if you had 2 ounces in here, I wouldn't leave that untended, because once it goes off, this can get so hot that it actually melts the cup, and you're going to see a bunch of smoke coming out, and it's going to be get all nasty. So this has a little bit in here, not a whole lot. I'm probably going to pour this out into a like a silicone mold that I have laying around somewhere, but just keep an eye on that so that way it doesn't do that. And in an hour and a half to 2 hours, I'm going to come back and we will show you the B stage and continue on from there. Okay, so we have reached the B stage. It is nice and tacky, but nothing is peeling up when you touch it. So I'm about to start laying down our carbon. See, I've already cut our pieces. Now you also gotta be mindful of when you're laying this down, the direction of the weave. You can see there's like this angular pattern to it. I want to make sure that everything goes lined up. I laid down the panels, left, top, right. This one I'm going to lay down on this side because I want the weave to come this way towards the front of the case. Same thing on this side and this side, so that way when you turn it, the weave is the same direction when you're looking at it from either side. So, like I said, you gotta be careful when you're handling this because you can, distort the weave, get it all crooked. So you just want to be careful when you're laying it down. You want to lay it down, you want to start at the middle and work your way out. You want to make sure that it's straight because you can kind of turn it so it's a little crooked, and you kind of want to just pat it down. You don't want to run your hand across it like that, because then your hand can actually catch these fibers and pull them, and you might have just one in the middle that's pulled out and it won't look right. So I just like to pat it down, make sure it's all nice and laid out, and basically what you're doing is you are sticking it to that layer of resin, and a little bit of that resin is actually pushing into the fibers, and it's going to lock in that way. Now what most people do at this point is, this is when they'll mix up another batch of resin and they'll start laying it on here, so that way it soaks in and it bonds with the layer underneath. I don't like doing that. I have had issues where your next layer, because the first layer of resin isn't completely cured, if you put down another layer of resin on top of that, I have seen that resin somewhat re-liquefy that first layer, and it'll actually lift up a little bit, and you'll have what's called pooling. You'll have a little bubble of resin stuck underneath of the fiber, and it'll lift up kind of like a bubble, and there's no way of fixing that. You'd have to rip off the carbon all the way off and redo it completely. So I just find it easier just to lay it down, let it fully cure, and then start putting your next layers on. So I'm going to put these on, and then what I'm going to do after that is I'm going to leave it sit until tomorrow. Alright, you can see here all of our carbon is laid down, so that way our angles this way, and again this way. So that way when the case, you're looking at the case, if you come around to this side, it's going this way, and if you come around to this side, it'll be going this, well, it's going a different direction, but from your point of view, it's the same direction. So I'm going to leave this set up overnight. We'll be back in the morning to continue on. Alright, we are tomorrow, following day. Everything has nice and solidly cured. One of the ways you can tell is the extra stuff that was in the cup. That's rock solid. So we know that the underlying resin has fully cured and the carbon is locked into place and isn't going to move around on us anymore. So this is the stage where we start adding our layers. I've gone and mixed up some more resin. I mixed up 2 ounces this time because now we've got fiber that it needs to soak into, so we're going to use more. And basically all you do is you use your brush and you brush it around, you tap it in, make sure it gets soaked into everywhere, and that's pretty much it for the next 2 hours or so. When it reaches the B stage again, when you can touch it and it's still tacky but nothing sticks to your finger. And then you can go ahead and start adding more layers. We're going to put about 3, maybe 4. I'm thinking mostly 3 layers of this. This is our left panel. All I'm going to do is I'm going to go from one corner to another, pour some of that on there. Now you can use your brush, like I said, and kind of brush this around. You basically, all you're really trying to do at this point is wet out the fiber. Make sure everything is nice and soaked in, because right now there is air in the fiber, and what we're doing is we need the resin to take its place. Alright, our first layer is down, and everything, all over the fiber has been soaked. Except for here in the middle. This is the top piece where that window is, so I didn't bother doing the inside here. But I wanted to show you how it looks. Now, if you do see things like, can you see it here? No, you just see the shininess, but there are some areas, like right over here. See it over there? There's a little bit of air between the fibers. Stuff like that at this stage is perfectly fine. The next stage will fill that in. You want to make sure that your fabric is wet, but not completely soaked, like dripping out, because that's, number one, it's a waste, and number two, it's just going to make a big mess. Before I started this stage, I did go ahead and I trimmed the sides. I trimmed them down a little bit. So here's a little trick. All your larger pieces like these, you want to save these, put these aside, put them in like a bag, or put them between two pieces of cardboard or something like that, and save these for if you want to do a smaller project. Smaller pieces and all those extra strands, I stick them into a bag because these can be used in what's called making things out of forged carbon fiber. That requires molds. So that's going to be in a future video when we start getting to the mold making stage. I'm going to do some regular layups, resin infusion, and also some forged carbon fiber. So these are going to come in handy for that. So for now though, I'm going to get a total of 3 coats on here, and I'll come back later in the day and I'll show you what we've got, what it looks like after all 3 layers are on. So see you in a few hours. Okay. Here's our second coat. We are 2 hours and 15 minutes later. You can see that the resin is now starting to lay a lot higher on the surface than it was on the last one. You can't see as much of the fibers sticking up and poking through like you can around this area here. And you can also notice, like right there, see there's still a little bit of a void. I think there are some on this piece. Yeah, there are some here and there. You can go around and you can pick and poke at them if you want to at this stage. I'm not going to because I'm still going to do another third and final one. So that next coat is actually going to fill in all the rest of those, and we're going to have a nice, clean, even sheet of resin over top of the epoxy. So from there we can sand and add additional layers as needed. So one thing that I forgot to mention when I was going over the things that you're going to need, this is optional, but a heat gun, hair dryer, or a handheld torch, they do help out a lot. I don't know if you can see any, like right around here, there are little tiny itty bitty little air bubbles trapped in the resin. You don't really want those because once we're finally finished, they can show through. Most likely not. But to be on the safe side, some heat from like a heat gun or something like that will pop those. So again, it's not totally necessary, but it just helps a slight bit with the appearance. So we'll see you in a little bit when the third coat's on. And I'm going to have to intervene at this point because this video has totaled 43 minutes long, and the almighty algorithm says that 43-minute long videos don't do so well as 25-minute videos. As well as the fact that I probably wouldn't want to sit here and listen to myself mumble on for 43 minutes. So I'm going to have to break this up into 2 pieces. Part 2 will probably be uploaded tomorrow. So stay tuned and we'll get this project finished up and we'll continue on learning. Then out.